Hey everybody. How you doing on this, well, in New York, kind of gloomy Thursday? Give it a second for some people to come on. I have a guest I'm really excited about today, who's going to pop on and talk to us about, hi, how you doing? About trans advocacy and trans rights. They are a specialist in this field, not just from personal experience, but the type of work that they do day to day. So I'm super excited to have them on. So I'm going to just wait, and when Bri Barnett pops on with their Insta, they're going to come on and chat with me, and I'm super excited. Yeah, me too. Hey, there, okay. There they are. Hold on. I think I can request a live with you. Bri, do the request to be on live with me, and let's see if it'll send it to me. I think it should do it. Let's see. It should prompt you to if you want to go on live with us. Let's see. Let me see. Oh, it says you're unable to join for some reason. Let's try it. Try from your end. On my end, it's saying you're unable to join, but I don't believe them. I wonder why that is. Let's see. Let's see. Hey, Abby. We're just trying to figure this out because it's not saying that I can have them on, and I don't understand why. Let's try now. Sent you a request. Hi, Drew. I sent you a request, Bri. Let's see if it actually does it. I don't know why.
Oh, rotate that.
Hi.
Hi.
It worked. I was like, oh no, I'm not accepting that as an option. Instagram, we're not doing that today.
Totally. How are you?
I'm good. How are you? Thank you so much for coming on and chatting with me today. I'm so happy to have you here.
Absolutely. I'm so happy to be here. Yeah, I'm having a nice day. We're preparing for the election like many people, and so it's a busy, stressful time of year, but so happy to be here and joining y'all. Thank you, everyone following along in chat. Really appreciate you being here.
Yeah, for anybody who's watching this now or afterwards when we add it to our IGTV, this is Bri Barnett. They are not only a trans activist and advocate, but they're actually a fundraiser for Trans Lifeline. And I was looking at your bio, and there's some particularly, you have like some very specific interests even inside of advocacy that are really important, and I don't think get talked about quite enough, even in like the trans community. I think that there's a lot of there's sort of the broad strokes things that people think about, but some of your interests are more granular, and I think that's really, really exceptional. I'll let you kind of do a little bit of an intro of the types of things that you have been passionate about working on. But it's really interesting how they are things that maybe aren't on the top of people's minds when they think about advocacy in this area.
Yeah, thank you so much. I come to this work as an organizer. I originally got involved in social change work, doing student labor, solidarity organizer organizing. I think we're all familiar at this point with the slogan, trans rights are human rights, but I also love the one that trans rights are worker rights, because of course trans people are more likely to be workers. I've had the joy of working professionally as a fundraiser. I've volunteered for organizations that do anti-racism work, that do anti-gentrification work, tenants' rights organizing. And professionally, I've had the joy of getting to work for an organization called Paid Leave for the United States. A lot of people don't think of paid leave, paid family leave, as being a transit issue. It's a huge one. Paid medical leave, I think, is one component of making trans healthcare accessible to people, because even if you can access the healthcare, some procedures, if you want them, they have really long recovery periods. And if you aren't being supported in that, I'm just like, I'm so tired of all the GoFundMes that are needed for trans medicine, for trans lives. It's really a sign of a broken system. I'm tired of us as a community having to pass the same $50 back and forth,
Yeah.
around the circle. That's not what justice is. And so when I think about like what trans liberation looks like, how to advance trans rights, I think a lot about specific trans initiatives. And then I also think a lot about general things about how we can make lives better for everyone in ways that really impact trans people really heavily. So yeah, that's a little bit about my background. I'd love to know, maybe your audience is more familiar, but I'd love to know a little bit about your background and what brought you to this work.
Yeah, I mean, I've been an advocate for human rights my whole life, but I definitely, in my later years, very much sort of needed to have my personal lifestyle and my belief system align with what I was doing for work. For a long time, I was in fashion and I was a creative director and did styling. And I did a lot of that actually with people in the queer community. And I used to actually work a lot with individuals who were sort of trying to find their style and their voice through their appearance. And I always really loved doing that. And the more I got to do it, the more it became a thing that sort of fueled me, and just my own gender, my own experience in understanding my gender. It took me a long time to, I'm 50, and it literally wasn't until my 40s that I realized that like my gender identity was separate from my sexuality. Like I just didn't have vocabulary around it, honestly, before that. Like I've been, queer for a long time, but I wasn't looking at that aspect of it. And I think as the more I came to understand that about myself, the more I realized, I need this to be part of my everyday life. It can't be something that I think about except when I'm at work. And I was working like, 60, 70 hours a week and stuff. And I was like, there's too much of a disconnect. And so when the opportunity, when our founder, Abby Sugar, who was a friend of mine that I'd known for years and years, but I was doing some consulting for them, and they were looking for a new business partner. And I thought about it, and I really was just like, wait a minute. And I was like, I think this might be the right fit. And so I've been able to be with Playout for the last few years, and getting to do things that are community facing and that actually are in alignment with my personal values and our company values and fostering our community. I just knew that I needed to make that my world instead of just this is my life, like who I am personally and how I date or who my friends are. It had to be the whole thing, and that's what I get to do now.
That's so cool.
So I wanted to ask you, so we're talking about paid medical leave and family leave, and talking a little bit about some of the advocacy and rights, but I read some really interesting things, and I read the story about the yoke and the tourists, and I just thought it was so interesting because I was a practicing Buddhist like for most of my 20s actually, and now I'm kind of like an amalgamation of the things that sort of work for me. Those are the things that I implement, and I sort of have my own, I've always had my own inner like ethics and moral compass, um, but I too have come to really enjoy meditating, and I thought there was a really interesting story in that, of how you came to where you are as well. If you would be willing to talk a little bit about that, I thought it was really cool.
Oh, yeah. Sometimes I focus so much on the professional aspects of my story and identity, I forget everything else that I do. So, yeah, I am a meditation facilitator. I teach people how to meditate. I meditate myself. And I'm really privileged to have especially focused on leading trans specific retreats and creating trans meditation spaces, and mostly in California. Um, and I got into that work through a place, Oakland. We have this magical little space called East Bay Meditation Center. And it's really unique in that it's meditation that's really focuses on accessibility to communities that don't have it as much. I think a lot of us, when we imagine like the quintessential like image of meditation, we probably are imagining like a skinny like white cis woman in like yoga attire, like full lotus waterfall behind her. That's not really like I think what like meditation is, or who meditation should be most accessible to, although like I'm sure it benefits people like that as well. And so I started going to East Bay Meditation Center like before I really had the language or was accepting of who I was, but I knew I was some type of queer. And so they have an alphabet sangha, they call it, LGBTQIAA plus SGL Two Spirit, I think is like the full name of it, but alphabet sangha for short. And they're just like got to be around other queer people, got to like be around the first trans woman I had ever really seen in like real life. I was like too nervous to talk to her. But like I think like kind of was a space where I could see like, oh, this is something real people do in real life. It's not like an internet thing. And that was really transformational for me. And what's amazing about EBMC is everything's so sliding scale that a lot of it's like free. Like I didn't really contribute much or anything, like a lot of the early times going there. And then so that I think says so much about how to make spaces accessible to people, that like they're founded on gift economics. Like really anyone can go there. They have dedicated sits for LGBT folks. They now have a monthly sit for trans people. They have people of color sits. They have like men of color, women of color, out like specific sits. They have accessibility, like people who are disabled specific sits, like really all of these ways for people to get involved in like with affinity groups that will feel comfortable to them. And it also doesn't stop there with EBMC. They also have like leadership development programs. I learned how to facilitate meditation retreats through their practice in transformative action training.
Cool.
And so it's like, I think sometimes people think about accessibility of like, how do we get people in the door? But they don't think about it when they think about leadership, and like, are our pipelines to leadership also accessible? And oh, I'm seeing in the chat, this is located in Oakland, California, if you're ever out here and it's not COVID times. East Bay Meditation Center. It's also cool. Like one silver lining to COVID is EBMC's affinity groups are now accessible from anywhere in the nation.
Oh, can you do it on? Can you do it on Zooms?
Yeah, you can totally do it on
awesome.
Zooms.
That's awesome.
So
Can you actually, do you know their handle? Because we can pin it in the, if you put it in the comment, I can pin it and it'll keep it at the top for people to see also.
Oh, I am. Is it okay if I look it up? I'm like
Yeah,
90%
no,
sure I know what it is.
no, it's totally fine because I can add it later though. I can also add it to the when we post it to the thing. Oh, Huntington Beach. I'm from Southern California. I
Yeah.
I spent a lot of time in Huntington Beach when I was a kid. Um, but yeah, that's so cool because you could actually do it from anywhere now, which is great. So I'll try to add that in. I'll get it from you afterwards, and I'll add it onto
Mhm.
the description when I put this on the IGTV, just in case anybody's interested. Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting point you make too about accessibility. There's a one thing about physical accessibility, but it's a whole other thing about financial, or I think a lot of people hesitate to do things like that because they think they're not going to be able to afford it also, like even before
Mhm.
they look into it at a certain point. Um, it's interesting too because I feel like this country, first of all, we treat mental health like it's a luxury, right? Like you have to like really pay for that. If you want to actually like feel good in your body and you actually want assistance in really feeling your best mentally, our country definitely does not prioritize that. They're not giving anything away. Um, so it's interesting. I think about that too, and I think about I'm from Southern California, so I came up in a culture where people were very into stuff like that, and there were sliding scale yoga classes, and there would be, you could, if you really searched, you could find like a Saturday morning at 6:30 in the park Tai Chi class that was for free because the person was an instructor somewhere, but they wanted to offer something also that people could go to when they couldn't afford to go to the regular classes. Um, it really is one of those things where I feel like not just maintaining your mental health as far as if you need therapy or any kind of chemical assistance or things like that, but this sense of well-being that our day-to-day life just keeps chipping away at. This,
Mm.
especially this last this last 4 years, just chipping away every single
Mhm.
day. And it's one of those things where access to that, I think people forget to take care of themselves in that way a lot of the time.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's also about it's about people prioritizing it, and it's also about it being like easily accessible for folks. And like if you have a local resource like that, and in SoCal want to shout out Insight LA, who actually has some trans leadership as well. Like it makes it so much easier, right? Because hypothetically, I could like start my own practice, but there was something about that like structure being there for me with my journey to meditation that was like so impactful and really made it possible. And so you referenced like this yoke metaphor I made, which is in reference to a common Buddhist parable saying the parable is often used to say like, hey, like if you get a human life, use it because it's so rare. And it says like the odds of um like achieving enlightenment, like or like getting a human birth with which you can achieve enlightenment is equal to the odds of like a blind sea turtle in the ocean putting their head through a golden hoop. And I think one way to look at that's like often used as like, oh, it's so lucky, it's so rare. But also like let's question like why is it so rare? Like what if there was an ocean just kind of full of golden hoops? To make that more accessible to people. And I think the beauty there is like we as individuals, we really have the power to accomplish that. And and yeah, I think that's really cool. I did see a question about my sexuality, I think, in chat, which I feel fine answering gender of course, distinct from sexuality. I identify as like a queer non-binary woman. I primarily date like non-binary, like I don't know, I'm like also identify as bisexual, but like also kind of as a dyke, but also mostly as queer. It's like I think these labels sometimes can be helpful, but I both like am really attached to some labels and also like generally hold like labels and disdain. And sometimes I express that by just like attaching all the labels to me. I'll be like, I'm like non-binary woman, like bi, queer, lesbian, dyke, gay, so on and so forth. It's like, yeah, just give them to me all. I think I've hit like almost every letter in the alphabet at some point in my life. So like, sure, yeah.
Yeah, it's funny me for me personally, I've always like I think it's cool and it's interesting that a lot of people now are really um embracing a lot of labels. But for me, hi, welcome. But for me, like I spent so much of my youth like trying not to be labeled and just being like, just leave me alone and let me live a life, you know? Like I don't want any of your boxed logic. Just get it off me. And so I was really adverse to it for a long time. I was just like, I don't know, I'm just a person. Like, I'm just a person. Like, just back off. And now I'm just kind of like, oh, this is kind of cool. Like, if people can feel empowered by that, and it gives them clarity and a clarity that they can share with other people and the public, that's awesome. And I'm a he, she, they, because I'm it's like you can't go wrong. I identify with all of it. I feel like it's just it's it fluctuates, and it's all part of me. But it's just so interesting because there's been such a shift like in the last 20 years between, you know, there used to only be like four labels anyway when I was young. So it was like if you didn't feel like you fit into those anyway, you were just like, I don't know. And now it's like we got one for everything. Everything.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
mix and
people
match trading cards. There should be trading cards. Like,
totally. And on one hand, I'm like, oh my God, I'm so grateful that like people can now have these labels if they find them useful to
mhm.
like be like hyper specific about like one aspect of their identity. I think that's so cool. And I think I only have hesitations when people like want to like get into the like some labels are better than other labels, like pan means you like trans people and bi doesn't. I'm like, as a trans person, like I don't know. I'm not gonna
Yeah.
that doesn't work for me, but generally does. Ooh, I'm seeing Queer LA says they're in the process of figuring out their
Yeah.
label. Yeah, you're like, if it's
Yeah.
helpful to figure out that label, go for it.
Yeah, I think defining something for yourself and then defining it for other people, you know, can be two totally different things. And then
Mhm.
if it empowers you, fuck yeah, go for it, you know? If it's something that feels like detracts from you or it causes you discomfort, don't do it. You know, there's no pressure. There should be no pressure to do so. You know, the thing that gets me crazy is when people pressure people to define what it is that they're experiencing, and it's like, well, this is quite a journey. Being a human is it's a ride, you know, and there's going to be these sections of your life that you should be you know, feel free and allowed to change. You know, your evolution might take you to three different places or four different things in a lifetime that you know, and it's not contradictory because it's where you're at the time.
Mhm.
You can go through those evolutions, and that's all perfectly natural, and it's part of your specific lifetime. And but it I find it challenging when people will really demand a definition of something, and it's like, why does it matter even, you know? Like, just
Mhm.
this just a we're just people, and we're just trying to be true to ourselves, and you know, in turn be true about ourselves to other people, and live our authentic life. But it is funny because it gets tricky sometimes, and I'll meet someone, and they will be, you know, good intention too, but they'll be like you know, I always joke about, like, you can, especially if it's like a cis het person, it's like, use Google first, like, go Google some stuff before we chat about it, because I don't want to have to be your Google if it's okay, you know.
I mean, totally, totally. And like it's I don't know. Also like for but yeah, I just want to give a shout out to someone like, you know, taking steps at 27, wishing that you had figured that out earlier. That's a big mood. That's a big mood. That's a hard mood. I've been there. I've come back. I like go there still sometimes. And it's like, you know, there's no time like the present. And like, I don't know. Sometimes I reflect too on like where I was at different stages in my life too. Like thinking about like, oh my gosh, like my high school was recently in the news for like refusing to close um despite state orders to like stop in-person teaching right now
Oh,
for
interesting.
COVID. And part of me was just like, never change my high school, because I remember when I was in school and the big scandal was like the dean of students was using the school security cameras to spy on a lesbian couple and then give that tape to one of their parents who like shipped her off to a conversion camp.
Woo.
And and I think like, oh yeah, like even if you had the language, even if it was different, it's like, are you gonna like come out and like figure yourself out in an environment like that? Like probably not. It's like
Yeah.
I feel like there's such this like it's like this personal responsibility, kind of going back to the conversation about like yokes and having different opportunities. It's like for people to like come out. It's like it's not about us entirely as queer people if we don't like figure ourselves out the first time or the second or the third or fourth or ever. It's like also like we live in a world that makes it difficult too. And even if we didn't, like the journey is still so beautiful as, or it can be. Not to say it's not also hard and painful. Yeah, I'd be curious, like, what has, especially now as you've like moved into kind of queer trans entrepreneurship, like what have been some beautiful parts of your journey?
You know, it's a big moment for me. It, I, it's, it's just like a strange way of it coming about, but I had a preventative double mastectomy, because of my genes and my family history, etc. And I had had a lot of problems. I had constantly was having to have biopsies and all this stuff, and it really was very stressful to me, starting from when I was like 36 on. And so at a certain point in my 40s, I got to the age where they actually approved for my insurance. I was very lucky. They approved for my insurance to give me a double mastectomy, preventatively, because they were like, yeah, you're high risk for breast cancer in the future. And it wasn't until I like settled in, like after that surgery, I knew in going into the surgery, I did not want reconstruction, but I didn't know why. And I
Mm,
hadn't really thought about that as having anything to do with my gender identity at the time. I really
mhm,
didn't. I was just like, oh, breasts don't define me. I don't need that to be a thing. I really want to get back to the gym quicker. I want the recovery to be faster. I want to get just like back to my regular life as fast as possible. And I'm not, you know, I like, I'm not really worried about not having breasts. And after that surgery, it was like the Rubik's cube clicked. It literally was like something just happened. And I was like, get the fuck out. I'm not a super butch lesbian at all, man. Like, I am so queer and I'm so transmasculine, non-binary. I just like was like, what? And it blew my mind because it was like all of this time there, you know, there was this sort of it like wasn't quite there, right? And I was like, something just doesn't, it's just there's something's not in
Hmm.
alignment. And as soon as that happened, I was like, oh, I know what it is. It was so funny. It was like I just went like, oh man, am I slow? Like it was just it was strange, but that was a kind of a magical moment for me. Like I really was just like, okay, you know. And then I was like, I guess we're going to teach this old dog some new tricks because this is a whole other thing to investigate about myself, you know. And I really appreciate that moment, and I you know I I'm always pretty ballsy. Like everything that I do, I'm pretty like, let's just do this. But that was one of those decisions that I had a lot of people. My doctor tried to talk me out of it for a year. For a year, they tried to talk me out of because I wanted flat top, right? I wanted a flat closure,
Hmm.
and and it was a female doctor, no less. So I had to have
Hmm.
four consultations with her over the course of a year to convince her to do the surgery the way that I wanted to have it, that I wasn't going to like change my mind or come back and try to sue her or whatever. And I just thought that was insane. And I said, look, I'll sign whatever you want. I'll sign whatever waivers you want. I know exactly what I want. And I brought it, I showed her pictures, right? I showed her pictures like on my phone. I was like, this is what I'm after. And she was like, are you sure? Like she was just like, you know, and I was like, yeah, I'm 100% sure I'm down with that. Because it was just, you know, going to be scars straight across. And it was just so interesting. I'm just really glad that I stuck to my guns and that I didn't allow this system and this expectation to like make me sway away from what my gut instinct was that whole time. I'm really glad that I just like knew in my heart of hearts that that's what I wanted, because as soon as I had that, I was like, oh, this feels so right to me. This totally is like I am so comfortable in my own skin right now. It's really
Hmm.
interesting, but I came to it in a really unusual way.
I love that. There are so many ways, and I mean, I've had that experience with like procedures that I've had to like more actively seek out and justify through a trans lens. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I get to have this because I'm trans, like, or like, you know, I also think it's so weird that it like ends up being framed in like ways that are really true and like real around like this is about like livability, this is about survival, this is mental health, this is about suicidality, and it's like, yeah, sure, like I'm not saying that any of that's wrong, but like the justifications, I don't know. It's like why can't it be enough that like it's about like daily like lived experience, quality of life
Yeah.
things, and because it's been shocking to me in having things like happen that work out surgically, like, oh shoot, like I knew I wanted this, I knew it was important to me. I didn't know how important it was until afterwards. It's like impossible to know until afterwards sometimes, and just like that level of comfort. Also, I don't know, it gives me some hope and also some sadness, just like the ways in which like even like just trans mental health could be so different in a different society, in like an accepting society, and a
Mm-hmm.
society that like really had like places like for an understanding of like trans people. Like it would probably be better in ways that like kind of similarly we can't even wrap our heads around, without having that like visceral experience of living in it.
Yeah, and it also the thing that the parallel that I always see growing up in Southern California, I don't know why it's not enough just because I it would make me happier about myself. Like that
Mm-hmm.
alone needs to be a good enough reason for me to have an adjustment, right? I think about all the people. I'm the only female in my family not to have plastic surgery, at least one type of plastic surgery, if not many types of plastic surgery. And I and all cosmetic. But it's like, well, so why, you know what I mean? Like, why is it that we can look at that and be like, oh, well, that makes some, of course if your nose doesn't make you happy looking in the mirror every day, then, you would get your nose fixed. And there's a whole, there's a huge acceptance around doing things like that. But it's like, oh, I look in the mirror every day and I don't feel comfortable with these breasts. It makes me upset, or whatever it is, like it should be enough that it's because this individual person on their journey this is their sensation that they're having, and it's important to them, and that would make them feel good looking in the mirror every day. Then that needs to be enough. Like their happiness with themselves and being in their own skin should be enough.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, and yeah, I we have so far to go with these things, and just like understanding of basic humanness. And it's also weird too how like a common justification for denying trans health care is like, oh, well, if we cover these procedures for trans people because it makes their life better, then we don't want to do that as an insurance company because we'll have to cover them for cis people too, potentially. And
That's so ridiculous too. It's just so fucking that's I can't. It's so obnoxious. It's like, what are you talking about? But they'll cover like a million deviated septums or like all this other stuff, and then it's like so ridiculous. And also, what cisgendered person is gonna go, oh, I want that? Like,
yeah.
it's not the thing, It's like that is the most. I don't know. Insurance and the way that this country handles its healthcare is just astounding. Every day, I'm more and more astounded by the lack of humanity that exists. And then sometimes I feel like, oh, it's, maybe it's getting better. And I heard about somebody who had this happen, and someone found a great, there's like more people finding good endocrinologists that are outside of main cities and all these things. And there's people that are starting to have specific practices to help the trans community. And that's amazing. Can't be enough of those, like keep them coming. But, and then on the flip side, next thing you know, something at a federal level is getting reversed, or it's relentless. It's such a battle.
Yeah, it's really relentless, and also like it's so impactful for people. Like at Trans Lifeline, we really see how like those policy announcements always come with spikes in calls. Like when we're in coalition work with other suicide prevention orgs, which is like not really how we see our own work, but how others see us.
Mm-hmm.
It they all like see spikes in calls like when a major like celebrity or something chooses to end their lives. For us, it's always like these political attacks that really create such tangible harm for the community and make people feel like, oh no, like the things I need in life aren't going to like, not only aren't going to be provided for me, but like aren't even going to be an option. Like it's not within like the scope of possibility. Like this is a place that like, yeah, not only isn't creating options for me, but is actively like wants me to not exist, is
Yeah.
just so draining. And I don't know, I just welcome any space that creates space for trans people to be providing resources to other trans people, because I think like the fact that we really want us to exist, it's like not enough on its own, but it's a whole lot. It's like incalculable.
Yeah. I mean, I'm pinching myself. I'm a fact. I'm right here. Like, I 100% exist, and it's not possible to undo it. I'm just telling you, I'm right here, and there's legions of people, right? And it's so strange to me, this idea of, it's always right. It's how the whole thing's been set up from the beginning, is like control through fear, shame, like power.
Mhm.
That's how people assert power. And it's just so interesting how systematically, like, organized religion and politics, which there's never really been that much separation of the two of those. um like, I keep saying, I'm like, God is on our money. There is no separation of church and state. Like, they very much interact and feed each other in this country. But this concept of erasure, it's just like, I, I, especially in this day and age, with the connectivity that the internet has given us now, and social media, etc. Like, I think it was easier for me to fathom um, genocides, etc., like, as being obviously just horrific and super extreme, but the mindset of being like, of fearing and destroying what you don't understand because you didn't have any understanding or accessibility to that, or like study of it, or like, when the world was very, very separated before there was these TVs and all these other things, right? Like, people would stumble upon something and be like, there's something I don't understand or know. I'm going to just smush it and then figure it out later. And it's like, all these cultures have sort of done that, and it's how these empires have fallen, right? Is just power and control being like, I'm going to take over this. And it's so interesting, though, because you would think that with the connectivity that we have, that would immediately lend itself to more empathy, right? Like, it would literally lend itself to being like, oh, I see that there are other people, all kinds of people doing all kinds of things all over the world. So that should be the norm, that everybody is different. They're, normal. I hate that word. I don't like that term because it is silly. But acceptance, right? That there are these different cultures, that people believe in different things. It doesn't mean that somebody's right and somebody's wrong. It's that is their culture, and that is what they have understood and known. But it just, I don't know. I sound crazy right now because I get so frustrated that, in a weird way, I feel like it hasn't done the job that they have wanted it to do, like these claims of what social media was supposed to do. And yes, we can find out all this other information, but if at the end of the day, all that does is create, uh, larger battles, like new versions of battles, like this last election was an internet battle for that win. Like, I don't know. It's, where is it going to go next?
I mean, I think like it's like really important to also remember that like this like hatred of others, it's not that it's just like misunderstanding or ignorance. It serves a really essential purpose in like solidifying power and how power like operates. That like hating trans people, like violence directed against like trans women, trans femininity, like that's a way to define like who a like man is and isn't, and in this very narrow way around like power and control. Similarly, like there is where I see like the erasure of like trans men come into play, and like trans masculine people, because that's like a policing of a boundary of like who isn't allowed into this very narrow like white Christian like maleness that is supposed to hold power and consolidates that power through the elimination of other people. And we see that happening, of course, with social media. And it's, I don't know, it's so complicated, because something I can say for certain is trans lifeline like doesn't exist without the internet. Like not only because we use it in ways to like run, but also like when we were getting started and until today, like the vast majority of our funding comes from small individual donors who seek us out and find us. Like a lot of that money, like how we got here was really off of like unsolicited gifts, which is unusual. And I'm not sure if you get that in a world like I'm not sure what like the funding model is to let like these real community based like widespread services like ours exist without those tools. But yeah, the
Yeah.
tools though are designed for and by still like there's still these tools of power, but also like I don't know, I love to see our people using it to create resistance. I love to see little
Oh yeah.
Twitter sub communities that can be like really specific, be a place for diaspora communities to connect, for trans people to connect. I mean, I'm not sure about you. I know the internet was a big part of like me knowing, like being able to figure out who I was, but
Oh yeah.
it's hard.
I'm not anti-internet, but what I
Mhm.
am is I'm just floored that and
Mhm.
I'm just kind of floored that it hasn't um you know, I think the ideology behind it in the beginning and was this, you know, it's been talked about that it's like it's to bring the world together, but
Mhm.
I think equally in that it has been, you know, I just in this last election, and I'm thinking about this election too, I feel like there are people that would literally do anything and cheat, lie, steal, you know, any type of propaganda to win. And you know, the way in which they utilize that tool last time is just terrifying because, you know, it just it that is what won that election because it was not the popular vote.
Mhm.
So in coming up to this next one, I'm just like, whew, what are they gonna figure out how to work this system? And obviously they went after the postal system this time, which is just crazy. But yeah, no, I mean, I'm on the internet. I'm like, I'm a creative director, so for me, it's like to
Mhm.
have access to imagery and finding talent. Like I get to work with amazing people, and I'll have people DM me out of nowhere, and I'm like, yeah, I would love to make something with you. And you know, that's the amazing part of it. It's always just that you know, there's this other. Right at this moment, I just after the last 4 years, I did not see this. I didn't see this kind of dark turn in how it was being used. I just didn't think it would go that far. You know, I just
I
was like,
mean,
whoa, how did this, you know, between that and uh, yeah, and with Brexit, and I was just like, whoa, this is,
ascended fascism certainly is scary. I'm so we talked a little bit about like my Buddhist work. I'm also like involved in like Jewish activism, especially these days, in Jewish organizing. Come from Jewish background, and story I've learned recently about Jews is this like specific time during World War II, I believe in Ukraine, when the Nazis took like a bunch of Jews to a field. And the people started like singing this song that translates to like, we will outlive them, is like it, which, like, yeah, like I think there's so much potential for like really scary violence that might be new to some people in this nation. It certainly is like the entire history of this nation
yeah,
for like native people, for black people, for so many people. But I also do find a lot of resilience in this thought that like fascism is like these ideologies of like extermination, like they're also bound to fail and we are bound to win. Like we will outlive them. Like we as trans people, like always been here, always going to be here. There's zero question in my mind about that, which, not to say like obviously we need to organize, we need to do our things to take care of each other, to resist all of that stuff, but like I don't know. I really believe in our resilience.
oh yeah,
I'm yeah, just in awe of it every day.
yeah, and I mean that subject of um, we got into that on a live recently as well, with someone who works with us, Edmund, and this conversation about how, you know, the this othering is actually more recent. Like so many cultures always had a place for this and have always recognized gender being not necessarily, you know, built around this binary, and this is a much more modern implementation of this really divided binary of gender. And it's interesting. I would be curious at, you know, not today because we're about to run out of time, but I would love to chat with you more about that, and maybe have you on to chat with Edmund as well, because they've studied that a lot. It's something that they actually have done a lot of work on, but it is interesting because it's, you know, we I think sometimes there's a perception that this is like a new thing. It's like, this is not new. This is not new at all. This is always, it's always there. It's always been present in every culture, but we have a very defined puritanical version of culture now that is, it doesn't make space for it.
Yeah, there's been a lot lost and also a lot kept alive by a lot of like really, really resilient folks. And I look forward to that work, like finding like my own like historical, like cultural identities, and then also realizing I'm of course going to navigate that through like where we are today. And I don't know, it gives me a lot of hope to see like, you know, whether it's businesses like yours or like all these mutual aid efforts popping up right now, or just, I don't know, so many little collectives. Like I I guess what I'm trying to say is I believe in us, and
Yes.
it feels good to believe in us.
Oh yeah. I mean, I feel like this is just the beginning, right? This is like,
Mhm.
this is the start of, so for us internally, we're always saying like, this is the new order of business, is people like shopping with along in line with their ethics, and wanting that transparency from who they're giving their money to, how that money is being used. We're a social good company. We give away 20% of our profits for LGBTQIA plus and BLM organizations. All of our ambassadors have an organization that they can choose. That can be it can be any 501c3. It's like, it can be a small regional one from maybe their hometown or something, or it can be a larger, you know, more national or international level organization that they help promote, and that we raise money for. But it's, I think we're just at the start of all of this and what it can be and how it can be used in favor of helping these communities. I think it's just the start. But I think it's, you know, I'm just hell bent on changing this particular industry, and particularly, you know, shop people being able to shop what they feel comfortable in and not having it be assigned and attached to gender. Like, I just don't think it's necessary to enjoy yourself and wear things that express your personality, and I just don't. It just seems silly to me at this point.
It, Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And it's been so lovely getting to connect with you. I agree. This is like just the beginning of so many conversations, and also we covered so much ground. I want to give like a shout out to chat for everyone who's been like following along. Thank you for dropping in. Yeah, it's been lovely to connect with you, E.
Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it. I'm going to. I will put the trans lifeline in the description of this for the IGTV.
Mhm.
But also, yeah, I think we should connect and talk about, you know, ways that we can be supportive as a company to that organization, as well as where I'm going to put a directory in our new website for resources. So I'd like to talk to you about that as well, for some West Coast things that we could be adding to that as well.
Absolutely. That sounds terrific. And I look forward to following up and being in touch with you.
Awesome. So nice to meet you.
So nice to meet you. Have a lovely evening.
You too. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.